The wilds of Alaska, vast, untamed, and dangerous. A place where predators roam and people vanish at an eerily high rate.
There are so many different ways to disappear up here, whether it's by accident or just wanting to disappear on your own.
Did a famous Alaskan renegade disappear by accident or on purpose?
Alaska is probably the easiest place in the world to hide a body.
It really was a Jimmy Hoffa case in a way. It was a mystery.
There was no sign of a struggle. Nothing appeared to be out of place.
The hardest thing was not knowing what happened to him.
The theory of murder was the highest on the list, and the only question was, who was it that wanted to bring him harm?
Fairbanks, Alaska. Civilization's last outpost before the vast Yukon Territory.
After Fairbanks, it's wilderness. You head north from Fairbanks, there's nothing else.
It's Alaska at its wildest, with 3 months of dark, deathly cold winter, where temperatures plunge to 80 below.
Fairbanks is its own animal. It was founded on gold mining, and the people up there have a reputation for being a little bit more independent, a little bit more rebellious than the rest of Alaska, and that's saying a lot.
On June 1st, 1993, state troopers get called to a remote Fairbanks cabin by a close friend and political ally of a resident named Joe Vogler.
Joe in days, hadn't spoken to him.
He says he's worried. He hasn't heard from Joe in a couple of days.
And I came up here and the doors are all locked and his truck's out there.
Joe's truck is parked outside and the house is locked.
And stuff looks really suspicious around the back door. Can I show you that?
Except for one door secured from the outside.
I don't recall anything like that.
Inside, no sign of Joe. It doesn't look like there was any struggle, but something's definitely wrong.
There was copious amounts of dog feces all over the living room and the kitchen.
Man, this doesn't look good to me.
And same with the goose. The goose always had fresh water in the overnight box, but that water was gone.
Joe would not have left those dogs. I mean, he wouldn't put a dog out in the cold. Joe Vogler told me once, he said, if there's a heaven and all of my dogs are not there, it's no heaven at all. That was his belief. That's how he felt about his dogs.
Joe left his wallet and heart medicine, suggesting he didn't expect to be gone long.
He was known to carry a pistol. It was missing. I couldn't find it in the house. Everything's still a question. Nothing's carved in stone at this point, but we're interviewing witnesses.
His friend claims he has no idea where Joe is. He says he last spoke to him on the phone 2 days earlier. Their conversation had been cut short by someone coming by the cabin.
Joe said he needed to answer the door, and that was the last he heard from him.
So, was this mysterious caller responsible for Joe's disappearance? Police don't know, but one thing's for sure. This is no ordinary missing person case. Troopers know all about Joe Vogler. He was lured to the rugged outback in 1942, even before Alaska became a state.
The story is he got run out of Texas for calling Roosevelt a no good communist son of a bitch. And that set the Texans off, I guess. When he got here, it was like he'd found a diamond in the north. He loved the freedom and the liberties and the core of the people that lived here.
He was a successful gold miner and politician.
To Alaska!
In the 1950s, as many worked for Alaskan statehood, Joe fought against it, claiming the U.S. government just wanted to steal resources.
Well, Joe certainly was not opposed to oil development. However, he was certainly opposed to Alaska not getting its share. There were numerous periods in our history where certain pieces of legislation were passed that reduced the taxes upon the oil companies, and Joe was generally opposed to that for very straightforward reasons. He wanted more for Alaskans. So he opposed the oil industry because its interests are naturally in opposition to Alaska in terms of trying to get more for itself, meaning less for Alaska.
There's no compromise. The moment you start compromising, well, they're just going to keep backing you up. They get their foot in the door, it's like an elephant, and pretty soon the elephant's in and you're out.
Alaska's got some real legitimate beefs about how she even got in the Union. I've seen the Joe taught this. He showed people the documents. And in Alaska's statehood election was absolutely in violation of international law and treaty. Hands down, a rigged election. I can understand why these half a dozen businessmen made their way to Washington, D.C. to plead their case for statehood. But the key word there is they were businessmen. Their focus was on dollars and property. And we see where that's led us in the United States of America today.
After Alaska joined the Union in 1959, he founded the Alaskan Independence Party to overturn the move. His fiery spirit drew both enemies and followers.
If he had been alive during the Revolution, he would have been one of the founding fathers. His personality, in one word, was determined.
Colleagues, friends, supporters.
When Joe was right, and he was right an awful lot of the time, he was determined to have it the right way.
Of my visit to the United Nations. Yes, sir. That's right.
Joe kept up the fight for decades, including several runs for governor.
Alaskan Independence. Well done. For years, the federal government has
He gained the world's attention.
And we haven't seen a dime. And that is going to change. We've had enough.
And in early 1993, was invited to address the United Nations about Alaskan independence. But just 1 week before he's scheduled to speak at the UN, he disappears.
It really did appear first that he just wandered off because there was no sign of a struggle, there was no blood, and there were only 3 things missing. Joe himself, his weapon, and his fedora, that was his trademark.
Troopers check with other friends and learn no one has seen him in the last 2 days. Some speculate he might have gone out for a walk and lost his bearings.
Yeah, if Joe had to just take off into the wilderness, especially ill-equipped, it'd be difficult to survive. He was a little bit older, though he had some skills. Alaska's still a really tough mistress, and north of Fairbanks is far worse.
A police helicopter checks a 2-mile radius around the cabin, while volunteers on foot and horseback scour the thick brush on Joe's land.
Anything?
Once the word got out, there's searchers and there's troopers and search dogs and all sorts of people.
As worry mounts, authorities search the twisting darkness of old mine shafts on Joe's property.
Alaska is also rife with hard rock mines, and maybe he was exploring for gold around an old mine shaft or something he could have easily fallen in.
His close friends don't think it was this sort of accident.
He was not a doddering old fool wandering off in the wilderness or just walking off and never coming back. Well, even if he's going to go for a walk, Harley took at least one or two of the dogs with him.
After a complete search of Joe's land, there's no sign of Alaska's most infamous politician.
He was not there. I knew that. I was part of the search myself. We have the rest of Alaska to look at.
This wasn't just anybody going missing. This was Joe Vogler. He was our most vociferous, most loud, most flamboyant politician we've had. And so when he disappeared, it was like the whole state was mining for him.
Some wonder if Joe had been overcome by grief. His wife, Doris, died of cancer just a year ago. The couple had been incredibly close.
She and he were like two sides of a coin. She absolutely adored him. When she'd look at him, her face would change. You could see how much she loved him. And it was mutual. He was devastated at her loss. It just killed him. It really did. The light that she put in his eyes was out.
Had Joe gone to visit her remote grave deep in the Yukon Territory? And once there, had his grief made him choose to join Doris on the other side? Or is it something more malevolent? All anyone really knows is that Alaska's political firebrand left his cabin and vanished.
Joe is, in fact, out here in the woods, whether he walked out there because he was going on a walk or someone marched him out there, and we have to expand our investigation to every possibility.
It really was almost like a Jimmy Hoffa case in a way, where they knew he was gone. They knew, obviously, it probably wasn't a very good outcome, but they still never had a body. And so it was a mystery.
State troopers have an Alaska-sized mystery on their hands. When Joe Vogler, the founder of the Alaskan Independence Party, vanishes, theories abound. Had he wandered off or gone to grieve at his wife's grave? The story leads newscasts across Alaska.
This is not a case of grabbing at straws. This is a case of trying to find Joe Vogler, and this whole state is asking where he is.
Most of the searchers are looking for a live Joe Vogler, but we're also inclined to think that we might find his body out there. But needless to say, we're looking for Joe.
As the search expands, troopers check flights out of Fairbanks. They find no record Joe skipped town, and no sign he'd been to visit his wife's grave.
He was heartbroken at the loss of her, but he was healing. He'd come through it. It was a hard trail for him to travel, but he'd come through it. That man would never even, I think, consider the thought of taking his own life. He'd never kill himself. That's a crock of hooey.
No bank activity, no phone calls. After 5 days, authorities switch their search from rescue to recovery. But chances of finding a body are slim.
A lot of animals in Alaska don't have the same fear or repulsion of man that they do in the lower 48. You get out far enough where the animals have little exposure to man, they'll eat a body just as much as anything else. By the time they're done, you won't see any sign of anything.
New theories start to surface. Maybe the gold miner was kidnapped.
There was kind of a commonly held belief among some people that Joe had a lot of money. that he had money stashed, that he had gold stashed.
We waited for any kind of notification. A ransom call would have been a welcomed call because you can ask for proof of life.
Or maybe he'd been silenced by a political enemy.
He was pretty fiery. When he said, "I'm not a damned American," you know, that can fire up some anger.
Members of Joe's party cover the state with "Where's Joe" signs.
It was a shot in the arm to maybe, trigger something where maybe somebody saw something.
Some in the party don't think troopers are doing enough.
There's nothing at this point in time we've recovered that indicates foul play at all.
If it had been the leader of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party just up and disappeared, you think there would have been maybe a little bit of an investigation?
Joe's supporters say Joe had been getting vague threats from anonymous callers recently.
He poo-pooed a lot of it, but he has been receiving threats for a goodly many years because of his position and his opinions on things.
They worry now the threats have become real, and they hire a private investigator.
We all kicked in about $1,000 to get it started. We felt immediately, when we knew the facts, that the house was empty except for the dogs, and there was no sign of Joe or his hat. Something was amiss.
From the beginning, supporters wondered how someone could take Joe without tangling with his very protective dogs.
I'm not a detective. I just know that things work the way they work and that those dogs were off. They had to have been drugged, or they'd be dead because they'd have been fighting over who was going to hurt Joe. They'd have protected him, period. So they had to have been knocked out.
They have the dogs tested for sedatives. Now, they await the results. The PI makes a more immediate discovery when he searches Joe's home. A .22 caliber shell casing on the floor near the sink.
My first thought of it is, where's the gun? What did that come out of? Why aren't there any holes anywhere? There's no bullet holes in that house. Maybe it was a plant, was one of the thoughts that we mumbled around.
The PI turns the casing over to police. But party members want to know how the cops missed it in the first place. The mysterious casing gives Joe's supporters more reason to distrust the authorities' dedication to finding Joe.
I'd say the theory of murder was the highest on the list of any sensible person who knew Joe and the situation. The only question was, who was it that wanted to bring him harm?
The party's Where's Joe campaign uncovers plenty of suspects for troopers to sift through.
And we're getting tons of calls, leads, some of them pretty far-fetched, but a lot of them having to do with the government did this to Joe. Informants saying that they saw the government vehicle following Joe Vogler's vehicle. We have to follow up on all this.
Had the U.S. government finally had enough of Joe and gotten rid of him?
A government that can conspire to enter our nation into a war and kill millions of people certainly can be expected to kill one person with a lot less thought.
He would butt heads with the government about his many mining claims, and he and the Bureau of Land Management were always clashing together.
It's no secret, Joe Vogler deeply distrusted the feds. Friends recall one clash in the summer of 1984 that nearly became a gun battle. Joe and his crew drove their heavy equipment across federal land toward one of his private mining claims along Woodchopper Creek outside Fairbanks. A helicopter full of park rangers charged with protecting the land swooped in.
They were armed with automatic rifles, and he was almost certain they were going to take him out.
We have a court injunction for you to get off the property.
The Rangers served Joe with an injunction literally stopping him in his tracks. They claimed his equipment was damaging the federally owned wildlife preserve.
Clearly, when you have a trillion-dollar entity with tens of thousands of people working in its bureaucracies versus one lonely miner in the hinterlands of Alaska, it is a David versus Goliath situation.
No shots were fired that day. Joe believed he was targeted because he was so vocal about Alaskan independence and was gaining followers.
If you can demonstrate to people that they actually have the right to vote for independence and legal and legitimate, peaceful means of separating from the United States, now that is a very dangerous thing. That's actually more dangerous than some nutball wishing for a violent revolution.
Joe's political supporters finally get evidence of foul play when lab results prove Joe's most aggressive dog had been sedated the day he disappeared.
Somehow, somebody, somewhere along the line, drugged that youngest dog so it wouldn't be a problem, is what I'm thinking.
The deepening mystery draws lots of news coverage.
I think that there is a great possibility that this is a political assassination.
If Joe has been killed, justice must be served.
There's been no ransom notes and no requests for any ransom, no contact from anyone like that. I think Mr. Vogler was murdered, and one thing we'd like to do is to find his body. I look at everything, every lead, everything that's dangled in front of me. We have to eliminate that possibility as best we can. I don't care who did it. I'm going to find out who did it, and I'm going to arrest them and convict them at trial.
After the disappearance of political activist Joe Vogler, Alaska state troopers believe he's been killed. But they have no real suspects and no body.
Alaska's the perfect place to hide a body. There are millions and millions and millions of places you can hide people. If he wanted to put them under a rock, put them in a river, at the bottom of a lake, lay them out in the tundra, something's going to eat them.
As the weather warms, the search widens, with troopers and Joe's political party working with volunteers across the state.
We're doing these other efforts, trying to get the public involved in trying to find the body. Where's Joe?
Vogler left behind his beloved dogs, reason enough for his friends to believe he didn't just walk off.
We're certainly going under the impression that he's dead, that he'd been murdered.
One of his dogs had been sedated. Many in Joe's party think it must have been an insider who knew the dogs well enough to get close. Maybe the political ally who reported him missing.
People accused him of just sort of hanging on to Joe for Joe's name and his political connections.
His friend told police he worried when Joe cut their phone call short to answer the door. Yet he waited 2 days to report him missing.
The doors are all locked and his truck's out there. Where would he go without his truck?
To Alaska!
From the early years, he was by Joe's side as the Independence Party grew.
This is how we're gonna change it!
What we need is a governor with enough guts in plain English language to stand up to the federal government and say, gentlemen, you've sold us out. You've shorted us. You've short-circuited us. You've lied to us. You've done everything immorally to keep Alaska as a colony. Heaven help him if I get the opportunity as governor.
One of the times Joe ran for governor, promising a push for independence, his friend joined his ticket as candidate for lieutenant governor.
They were quite the team. It really did establish a presence of the Alaskan Independence Party. It was not a recognized party before, but they garnered so much support during their race that it was then a recognized party in the state of Alaska.
During the campaign, Joe's running mate took out a series of newspaper ads, portraying himself as a fighter.
Sure, he's got a picture of him with a baseball bat. He's gonna knock him out of office or whatever. He's gonna clean him up or whatever, however it went.
Now some wonder about the ad's violent undertones. They note Joe's late wife, Doris, was always suspicious of his friend hanging around Joe.
They were like fire and water. They did not get along one bit. I know eventually she ran him off, and he did not come back until after Doris died. It was within weeks of her death that he showed up.
Just days after he came back into the picture, some of Joe's equipment was vandalized. Soon after, he moved on to Joe's property as his watchman.
It was very clear that he was, over a period of time, was nuzzling up to Joe, trying to get into his good graces, trying to be influential in Joe's life, particularly after Joe's wife had died.
Many believe his ambitions reached beyond their political partnership.
He had made it known that he believed that he was Joe's heir, all of which seemed to make me more concerned that he may have had something to do with it.
Troopers also have him on their radar.
He dangled out there because he's the one that made the initial missing person complaint.
Killers are often the ones who call the cops first. He denies he had anything to do with Joe's disappearance. And there's no evidence tying him to any wrongdoing, especially with no body or crime scene. If he didn't snatch Joe away, had it been someone more powerful? Someone higher up in the state or federal government?
Joe had enemies. His politics were loud, and people suspected that somebody was trying to shut him down.
3 years before Joe vanished, he helped Wally Hickel run for governor under the AIP banner. He won, the party's biggest achievement. Once in office, Joe didn't think Wally pushed hard enough for independence.
Joe was of the mind, and I remember him saying it, he was going down to Juneau to, quote, see who got to Wally, because he figured somebody got to him.
Joe left the governor's mansion without answers and just as frustrated. He believed his best shot was his meeting with the United Nations, where he planned to make a bid for return to self-government. 1 week later, Joe Vogler went missing, and months have gone by with no sign of him.
How did he die? Was he shot twice? Was he bombed over the head? Was he drugged? Was he asphyxiated? Just exactly how did he die?
Well, it's on the talk shows like Dexter said there and everything, and everybody's talking about it. Of course, everybody's had an opinion or an idea of what's happened all along, you know.
The timing convinces his followers that whomever took him out was someone with access, someone who stood to gain power, or someone who desperately wanted to keep it at any cost.
You're done talking.
No one has seen Joe Vogler in about a year when he was discovered missing from his Fairbanks home. Search parties combed the area, but when troopers hit a wall, the search stopped. Now there's talk of reforming the search in Nenana, but this time investigators won't begin the search until they know for sure they'll stop when Vogler is found.
The biggest thing, of course, is to find Mr. Vogler's body. Not only for the family, but certainly for our case.
Joe Vogler epitomized the perfect politician for Alaska. He was a rebel. He was vocal. He didn't have this level of sophistication that most politicians from the lower 48 have, and he spoke his mind. We loved him.
State troopers are no closer to finding any evidence or a body.
Trying to find Joe's body, it'd be like trying to find a stash of gold. It'd be like a needle in a haystack.
Well, how do you get rid of a body in Alaska? People speculated of, well, fish food, chipper shredder, all this horrific thoughts and ideas going on that people would bring to you. People can disappear here, obviously, relatively easy.
Troopers and Joe's party members refuse to give up the search. As the Where's Joe campaign expands, searchers post new placards to mark cleared areas.
I also was wondering, where's Joe? I want to know where Joe is. I want to find his body. I need that body. I can prosecute someone later on for murder without a body, but I need evidence.
Some in Joe's party think the man who reported him missing might have been involved. Yet it's only an idle rumor, backed by no evidence whatsoever, and troopers do not consider him a suspect.
He was trying to run his own political campaigns, but he had no motive. He was not a killer. Not at all.
The frustrating case finally begins to break open when a tipster contacts the Alaskan Independence Party.
But he called, said, hey, this guy borrowed my truck to go up to Fairbanks. It comes back, it's repainted. There's a bullet hole in the door.
This happened about the time Joe Vogler disappeared from Fairbanks. But the caller hadn't thought there was a connection until someone pointed out the coincidence. The party's private investigator follows up.
I searched the truck and found a handwritten map to Joe's house.
Troopers conduct their own search, turning up a day planner with names and code words.
One was Joe, $ gold. Well, that certainly fit Joe Vogler, that he would have money around and could very possibly have a lot of gold around.
The caller says the man who borrowed the truck is Manfred West. It's a name familiar to troopers.
We always knew him as somewhat of he's a two-bit crook. He's a thief.
West made his way to Alaska in 1980 after trouble with the law in the lower 48. Joe Vogler was one of the first people he met. A cartoonist, West painted campaign signs for Joe and his running mate.
He liked to paint and draw things, and he was called Cartoon Freddy. That was his moniker. We never saw him as one who would murder, but one never knows. Stranger things happen under the midnight sun. So our investigation certainly focused on Fred West at that point.
Checking records, police learn West is supposed to be in jail for violating probation on a charge of writing fraudulent checks.
We thought he was safely tucked away in jail. Except that there came a time when I received a call from a confidential informant saying, you know Freddie's not in jail anymore, don't you? I said, what?
It turns out West was in a minimum security unit and simply walked away weeks earlier. Now, police are on the hunt for two missing men, Joe Vogler and Manfred West. They believe West will lead them to Joe, but he's long gone. He could be anywhere, concealed by a sprawling wilderness that offers the perfect place to disappear.
North of Fairbanks, it's miles and miles and miles of rolling tundra. It's a lot of craggy mountains and creeks and rivers. It's deep, it's dark, it's dense. It's a perfect place for somebody to hide out. It's a perfect place for people with nefarious intent to commit crimes.
We're using our resources to find Fred West. We were flabbergasted, but he had taken off.
Troopers put out an APB, check plane and train passenger lists, and start working their confidential informants in Alaska's criminal underworld. After 8 tense days, an informant contacts police. He tells them about a cabin he thinks West is hiding in. Troopers surround the place. West spots them.
Then he started waving guns in the window, I think a rifle and a pistol, and now we have a standoff. You know, now we're in a tough situation.
What? This is Sergeant McCann.
I said, why did this thing happen between you and Joe? What caused it? You know, and he admits, he says he's a petty thief, piece of garbage. But he turned murderer that day.
He won't say where Joe's body is, and vows he won't be taken alive.
It's all over, man. I ain't coming out alive. I got a living room full of dynamite. I'm dead.
Some of my troopers, they saw smoke. It went from smoke to flames. These guys think of pretty bizarre things when they're just trapped animals.
As the dry Alaskan air fans the flames, Sergeant McCann struggles to convince West his life is worth living.
And when he got back on the phone, I said, what are you doing, Freddie? And he says, it's all over. He said there was explosives there and everything, and it's gonna go up, and I'm going with it. And, you know, I actually pleaded with him not to do that. Don't do this, Freddie. You don't need to kill yourself. Come on out.
For more than 3 hours, Alaska State Troopers plead with Manfred West to give himself up.
Freddie, we know what happened between you and Joe.
I was supposed to get plastic C4 and didn't have any when I went down there. That's what started this whole damn thing.
Did you shoot him? Tell me what happened. Freddie, talk to me. Freddie, we don't need to do this. We don't need to. We can talk about this.
West chooses to go down in flames.
Get up, blow!
Things were exploding, propane bottles and propane tanks and ammunition and all kinds of stuff.
As fire engulfs the cabin, West comes to the door again.
Now, picture this, it's this orange ball. I mean, it's burning down, and we thought, oh, he's gonna try and make his way out of the back of the house. And we got guys with machine guns waiting to see what happens. But he went back into the fire. Then it was crackle, crackle, and the phone went dead. And the whole place was orange. It was just totally engulfed.
When the smoke clears and cinders cool, detectives search the rubble for West's remains.
It's all smoke and ruins. And the SWAT guys come in and they approached carefully, and we found him.
Miraculously, he's alive. Barely.
I've never had anything like that before. Almost comical. That, oh, he's dead. Oh, no, he lives. Oh, no, he's dead. Oh, no, he lives. You know, and then I would let the place burn all the way down. And then put the 2,000 gallons of water on it. And they bring him out on a gurney. They say he's gonna die at any moment. And then he doesn't.
As he's rushed to the hospital, troopers search the cabin for Joe Vogler's remains, but come up empty. This isn't the first time the deadly flames of suspicion have touched Manfred West. Troopers learned that just a year earlier, he supposedly stumbled upon human remains wrapped in a tarp in a burned-out cabin in Fairbanks.
In his thieving ways, this place had burned down, and he went over there looking for things that he could salvage, and he found what he thought was the remains of a person.
The victim is identified as a local woman, missing for just under a year. Troopers could never connect West to her death. After a lengthy hospital stay, West gets handed over to Alaska State Troopers. They charge him with the murder of Joe Vogler.
Then why don't you tell me the truth?
West agrees to talk. He says he went to Joe's home that day to sell C4 explosives.
I went up there to sell him some C4 explosives. He came out, he seen me, and he got furious. I mean furious.
Joe had occasionally loaned Fred money and perhaps had him do work, so Joe trusted him.
Yet, for some reason, West claims this time Joe came outside and told him to get lost.
I mean, I got dynamite.
They argued.
I'm not buying any dynamite from you.
He says Joe got furious and fired one warning shot in the air.
Future reference.
A second into the truck. After all the political intrigue, turns out it was just a brash decision by a petty criminal that brought down one of the state's larger-than-life characters. Instead of feeling remorse, West seems to savor the notoriety the killing brings him. He refuses to tell troopers where he buried Joe Vogler's body. But he can't keep his mouth shut behind bars. He brags to a cellmate about ditching the body.
The informant, he had a makeshift little map, but it wasn't a big X telling me exactly where, but it would probably be up on this little hillside off this little trail there.
That man guides troopers to a snow-covered area 30 miles outside of Fairbanks. The earth on the unmarked grave is undisturbed.
The gravesite is tucked away in the woods 25 miles out of Fairbanks. Just off of Chena Hot Springs Road, a dog sniffed out the site after a tip sent searchers to the area.
Fred West had indicated to me on the telephone in his confession that he had wrapped Joe in a blue tarp. I really wanted to see blue tarp first, and then there it was.
Wrapped inside, the remains of Joe Vogler.
The remains were pulled from the cold earth after over an hour of digging, under 3 feet of dirt and wrapped tightly in a blue tarp with duct tape.
He always said he would not be buried on American soil. He was an Alaskan, but not an American. And he wanted to be buried in Canada. And unfortunately, that's where his body was found, in a very shallow grave in Alaska.
His gun was never found. That Derringer's, as far as I know, has never been found. And his hat. If those two ain't trophies for some twisted, sick murderer, I don't know what is.
Prosecutors contend the career criminal skipped out on the court-ordered treatment program, but couldn't support himself. He figured he could finance a new life by robbing Joe Vogler.
Fred had flown up to Alaska with the murder in mind. Pretty clear from, in retrospect, that he had tried a disguise and had borrowed a truck and had target practice with the .22 the day before.
Because Joe Vogler could identify West, he had to kill him after the robbery. Afterward, he feared someone saw him, so he didn't ransack the house, and he painted the truck he used. Concerned a jury won't convict West for first-degree murder, the DA offers him a deal. Manfred West agrees to plead to second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. He gets 80 years. To Joe's staunch supporters, the story still doesn't add up.
He returns to Oklahoma, he comes back, arranges to borrow a truck, goes to Fairbanks, does what he did, paints the truck, brings it back to Anchorage, returns to Oklahoma. This is an awful lot for a guy that doesn't have any money. So in that sense, yeah, it's suspicious.
Many are convinced he didn't act alone.
Basically just a really fringe character, kind of a petty criminal. How does a guy like Fred West pull off a crime that was a pretty darn good crime as far as not leaving a trace, planning, and so forth?
Joe's political ally, the man who discovered him missing, was completely exonerated by police. Suspicion still swirls among some members of Joe's party.
If Joe got off a shot, Fred would be dead, in my thinking. Now, if Joe put that hole in the door of the truck that Fred was driving and didn't hit Fred, and Fred had some help, maybe they were able to subdue Joe and maybe take him elsewhere. See, all these little things, you want to start discarding them, but how can you?
There's no doubt in my mind that Fred West thought Joe had substantial amounts of gold stashed on his property. I just have this nagging belief that someone else was in collusion with Fred.
The fight for Alaska's independence lost its driving force with the death of Joe Vogler, though many are still loyal to his cause.
Joe was right. Anybody that knows Joe knows damn good and well he was right.
Except perhaps about one thing.
He really thought that the federal government was his biggest enemy. He didn't see that there was actually some even more close to home.